Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week starts the beginning of a new month, which means it's time for a new Spawn. Spawn number 18. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in February of 1994, I really like this cover a lot. However, I am surprised that this is what Greg decided to draw for the cover of number 18, when in reality, this cover is depicting an event that happens in issue number 16, so it seems like it would have been more fitting as the cover of issue number 16. But, I mean, it's still relevant to, the 3-issue story arc that's happening here. It just seems like it's on the wrong issue. Story, Grant Morrison. Pencils, Greg Capullo. Inks, Art Thibert, Dan Panosian. Copy, editor, and letterer, Tom Orzechowski. Color, Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. The first page picks up exactly where we left off in issue number 17, where we see the homeless men who live in the alleyways looking on in terror as Spawn is really up against the ropes and in a bad situation as the anti-Spawn seems to be just about to kill him. Most notably, this man by the name of Dipper, who up until this point I don't think has been featured at all. We've definitely never heard his name uttered. Seems particularly bothered as he happens to have a flashback of his time in Vietnam. Apparently in '69, he witnessed his entire platoon killed in an explosion and unfortunately blamed himself for their deaths as he believed that he wasn't looking out for them properly, which led to all of them dying. And upon seeing Spawn, who he considers to be a friend, being struck by these massive explosive bolts of energy coming from the anti-Spawn, it's kind of triggered this memory, and he feels that, he's just witnessing the whole thing over again, that he's been trying to escape for the last 25 years by becoming an alcoholic and drowning all of his memories and sorrows in his alcoholism. And now he's faced with this same, event again, but he's not going to let it happen again, as he decides that this time he is going to look out for his friend and he's going to step in and try and prevent the outcome that has haunted him for his entire adult life. We then see Anti-Spawn standing over the collapsed body of Spawn with his energy blade drawn. He raises the energy blade above his head, about to deliver the final blow and put an end to the afterlife of Al Simmons and send him back to hell, when suddenly he is struck in the back of the head with a pipe. And while I don't believe that actually injured him in any way, it was enough to distract him, as we see Dipper standing behind him saying, "You've got to watch out for your buddies." I'd also like to point out that for a guy who's been an alcoholic for like 25 years or so, Dipper sure doesn't look as bad as you would assume. In fact, he doesn't even look like a guy who would assumedly be in his early to mid 40s, let alone a guy who's been hitting the bottle for that long. Anti-Spawn, of course, is not happy about this, as we see him turn around with his hand ablaze, ready to kill Dipper. However, he is greeted by all of the other homeless men in the alley who have armed themselves as well with sticks and broken bottles and a 2x4 with some nails in it. And this guy even has a knife. And they state that Spawn is their friend, and that if he wants to go after Spawn, he's going to have to go through them first. However, they don't seem to really understand how grave the danger that they are in is, as we see Anti-Spawn light up both of his hands, stating that he's going to kill all of these men in the alleyway, when he is interrupted once again, however, this time by Spawn, who states that these people are under his protection, as he seems to have regained his footing and is ready to go on the counteroffensive. We then see Spawn land a huge uppercut with his fist glowing with necro energy. This knocks the Anti-Spawn backwards off of his feet. However, as he lands, he's able to remount a counterattack with another blast of energy from his hand. However, Spawn is fast enough to dodge this one and is only grazed by it, though he does state that he hears his costume howl in pain from the force of the energy that grazes upon it. He then realizes that he cannot once again allow the anti-spawn to gain the upper hand as he unleashes 2 blasts of necro energy, trying to end the battle as quickly as possible, as he realizes that his power reserves are low and his costume is definitely in bad shape and he can't survive a prolonged battle with this opponent. Spawn's attack connects and the blast knocks the anti-spawn back into a pile of trash and up against a brick wall. However, the anti-spawn is able to regain his footing quickly and leaps back forward through the air with his hand turned once again into an energy blade as he lunges at Spawn. Spawn tries to get out of the way, however, he doesn't move quick enough and we see the anti-spawn plunge the blade directly into his chest. Spawn screams out in pain as he states he can feel an electric style of burning coursing through his veins and does everything he can to try and remain conscious. He is able to land another uppercut, which knocks the anti-spawn backwards, pulling the blade out of Spawn's chest. Spawn then begins to pummel him in the back of the head and then grab his head as we see Spawn's fist starting to glow once again with the necro energy. We see the anti-spawn state that I'm going to kill you. However, Spawn says, yeah, sure, as he realizes that he's going to end this battle now or never. Spawn realizes that anti-spawn's powers may be similar to his own, as the anti-spawn seems to be weakened at this point and possibly has overextended himself. So he unleashes a large amount of his necro energy directly into the anti-spawn's head as we see it burst out through the front of his mask. And after doing so, he lets go and then punches directly through his head, which is awesome. We then see the anti-spawn collapse onto the ground as we see the fire of heaven leaking out the front of his mask, almost as if it were blood. However, he is still conscious and reciting over and over, "I'm going to kill you," in response to Spawn's actions. However, Spawn realizes that this is his moment and states that it's over as he unleashes a massive blast of necro energy right through the middle of anti-spawn's chest and directly into the ground, and does everything that he can to finally end the foe who has only just appeared but given Spawn the fight of his life. We then see the anti-spawn fall to the ground with smoke rising out of his chest as Spawn's hand is still glowing. Dipper comes up to him stating that he was terrified, but he had to watch out for his buddy. He then asks Spawn if he did the right thing. Spawn tells him, "Yeah, Dipper, you did the right thing." And then all of a sudden there's a huge flash as none of them seem to know what's happening. And then suddenly the anti-spawn has disappeared. Dipper makes the remark, "I'll be damned," and Spawn tells him, "I wouldn't recommend it." Meanwhile, on the space station that is hovering above the Earth that was captured by angels, we see the 2 angels who possessed the bodies of the astronauts who were on the space station, as apparently they recalled anti-spawn to the space station. I'm guessing that's not stated, but it seems most likely, as they believed he was going to be destroyed. They want to continue to improve upon their design and make another anti-spawn, or at least increase the power of this anti-spawn so that it can, in fact, match up to the Hellspawn and kill it. So they decide that they're going to increase the amount of elemental fire, as Jason Wynn pleads with them to stop and even begs for them to kill him, as he then screams out in pain as more of the elemental fire is pumped into him and his suffering only increases. Meanwhile, back in the alleyways, we see Spawn starting to walk away from the other men in the alley, stating that he really hopes that that's over and that's all there is to do with it. However, one of the men follows behind him and chastises Spawn for being so dumb as to think that Heaven would go to the trouble of empowering an anti-spawn only to have it defeated in one little scuffle. Spawn is quite surprised by the man and even states, do I know you? Who are you? The man states that they have crossed paths before and that Spawn even saved his life once. However, truth be told, it didn't really need saving, as this man is part of a group who has been keeping an eye on Spawn and taking interest in what's been going on with him since he's returned to the world of the living, and also states that he's come in contact with one of his other associates named Cagliostro, who we met in issue number 9. The man then states that there's a lot of things going on that Spawn does not understand, and that Heaven and Hell are not the only 2 players in the game, and also explains to him that there's a way for Spawn to remove the curse that he's under while retaining his powers. Spawn seems very confused by all of this and asks the man what he's telling him. He tells him that, if he works at it, he can beat the devil, and then gives Spawn his card. Spawn looks at it, states that it's blank, but the man, as he walks away, tells Spawn that when it needs to be, he will see the name that is printed on the card. Spawn, of course, is left puzzled by the whole interaction and realizes that this is just creating more questions for him, but at the moment, he doesn't have time to worry about that since he has more pressing matters at hand. We then see that Spawn has gone to Simmonsville in the middle of the Nevada desert. We don't know if he teleported there or if he traveled there by some other means. However, he did come strapped, and he is unleashing all kinds of chaos as he's come to the conclusion that he has to close off this gateway to hell, and the only way to do so is by destroying Simmonsville, as he's just laying waste to the entirety of this town built from psychoplasm. He is then approached from behind by none other than Major Vale, who yells at him to stop. That's an order. But Spawn looks over his shoulder and states, "Oh, Major Vale, it's good to see you," and goes on to chastise him and tell him that he doesn't follow his orders anymore and that he knows he and Jason Wynn are cut from the same cloth, and even asks Major Vale if he remembers an operation in Ecuador where 6 good men died and an entire village was wiped out. Vale then states, that was a covert operation. How on earth could you possibly know about it? I want answers. That's an order. Spawn once again tells him, "I'm done taking orders from the likes of you, and then this is something I should have done a long time ago." Spawn then puts a pistol directly into Vale's face, pulls the trigger, and blows a hole through his eye and out the back of his head as we see a huge explosion of blood and brain. Vale then collapses to the ground dead as Spawn stands over him, saying that he wishes that felt better than it did, but he's kind of distracted by the fact that he's still slowly destroying Simmonsville and reducing it to nothing more than a pile of ash and rubble, which on the surface doesn't seem like it would be that bad. But remember, Simmonsville is nothing but all of Al's memories from his entire life. So he's literally having to destroy every single location that he's ever been to and grew up in throughout his entire existence as a human. And at the same time, just reducing all of his memories to smoldering piles of ash. Except for one. He finally gets to the last one of his memories in Simmonsville, which is the moment on the lake where he proposed to Wanda. And seeing how that was such a touching and special memory for him, he can't find it in his heart to destroy it, even though he knows he can't just leave it here. So he uses his powers to reduce the memory down to nothing more than a spark so that it can be kept in a safe place. But he can't keep it with him because he knows it'll just be destroyed or lost. So we see him walk away from the absolute carnage and destruction that was Simmonsville and move off into the darkness as he finds a place to stash this memory. We then are teleported to New York, Queens, outside of the home of Terry Fitzgerald and Wanda Blake as the two of them are getting ready for bed. Wanda looking out the window, watching the rain come down in a terrible storm. Terry asks her if she's okay. She just states that she feels sorry for anyone who would be stuck out in this horrible weather, as we see Spawn in a tree outside of their house, as he states that he saved this memory not for himself, but for her, as he passes it into her mind. It only comes into her consciousness briefly, as she states to Terry that she just remembered something, but only for a moment, and it was gone. We then see that Spawn says, like, very quietly under his breath, "I love you," as Terry tells Wanda to come to bed and close the drapes. Spawn, standing outside on the tree with his cape flapping in the wind, realizes that, basically his life as Al Simmons is nothing more than a memory now, and that he's never going to be able to return to that life or return to what he was in the past, and that it's better that he just moves forward and leaves Wanda with nothing more than the memory of Al, and, allows her to move on with her own life. And, he's going to have to face the grim reality of trying to exist as this undead warrior now and cut his own path and, give up on what was, up until this point, his biggest motivating factor of trying to find a way to return to Wanda, which is a very difficult pill to swallow, but, it's something that he's just going to have to do now. We then see a full page vertical spread. Cool. Thanks, Greg. I love it. As Spawn jumps off of the tree and states that darkness is his home now, as he sets out on a new course and on a new trajectory for what his life is going to be going forward. We then see image info and a little blurb here, which oddly enough still talks about the fact that Todd is going to be the one coming back to write and pencil and ink the series starting in issue number 19, which, by the way, is not the case. Greg continues to pencil the series all the way up until issue 100. So, it's funny that they still hadn't, come to that conclusion just yet. And we do get this cool picture of a hockey team that Todd sponsors with super awesome Spawn hockey jerseys. Dude, these are so dope. I would love to be able to get my hands on one of these. These are cool jerseys. And unfortunately, they're all sized for children. And I'm an adult. But if he ever sold these in adult sizes, I would be down to buy one. The rest of image info is your standard fare of just little blurbs about upcoming books and what they're going to involve. We then get these two pinups. I have no idea who this one is by, as there's no signature at all. And then this one is by someone under the name of Pedi, P-E-D-I. And I believe that he also had a pinup in one of the issues of the Violator miniseries as well. We see that, because I remember it being like a monochrome thing just like this, where it's all black and then just like one other predominant color. That one I believe was black and purple, this one black and green, but I love his style. Like, it's very dynamic, and I really like how over the top he is with the look of the Violator in the background, giving him just insane amounts of teeth, but also a slightly different profile to his head, very, crinkled up but clawed hands. I like this a lot. This is a cool image, and I hope that we see more stuff from him in the future. We then once again get to the Spawning Ground letter section. Almost all of the letters in this one are all praising Todd and, just talking about how much they enjoy his work. And, despite the fact that a lot of people were unhappy about Grant Morrison and Greg Capullo taking over for 3 issues, they ended up liking issue 16 a lot. There is one, however, critical letter, once again bringing up the disdain that this person has for not only Todd, but the other guys at Image for canceling Shaman's Tears and, being very upset that the creator of that, Mike Grell, was basically, kicked to the curb. And, this kind of brings up an interesting point that, the foundation of Image was supposed to be a safe place for creators to be able to, create the type of comics they wanted to make. And it does seem somewhat hypocritical that the other guys at Image decided to vote Mike Grell out and drop his book, predominantly because it wasn't based around superheroes. And there was also the idea that they stated that it was because it was behind schedule a lot. But that's a really weak criticism given that all of the Image creators were way behind schedule on their books. Todd did the best out of everyone, and even he was missing deadlines pretty frequently. He never went on full 6-month dead spaces between issues, but still, it was enough that it was noticeable, and that's one of the things that letter points out. Todd doesn't really give the best explanation as to what happened. Mostly he just says that the guy who wrote this letter doesn't know all of the things that happen behind the scenes, and this isn't really the format for Todd to really explain that. So take from that what you will. I, tend to agree a little bit more with the guy who wrote the letter that, if you were going to create Image Comics as a place where creators could express themselves without worry of whether or not an editor of sorts was going to put the kibosh on what they were doing, and then eliminate somebody from the roster for essentially doing that, it does look bad on your organization and what you said the organization was about in the first place. We then get 2 pages of Image fan art. These are always pretty cool. I always thought it would be really neat to have any of your work published in a nationally syndicated comic book. Most of them are just standard fare of different Image characters, but I really like this one down here because I think it's creative. It's a picture of the Violator wearing Spawn's costume with a little speech bubble that says, "You fools, I'm not really Spawn." I thought that one was really unique and funny, and that one really caught my eye. We then get an advertisement for a back issue blowout sale for Spider's Web in, I don't know how to say this at all. Is it Puyallup or Puyallup, Washington? If you're from that area and you happen to see this and you can phonetically spell that out in the comment section, I'd be greatly appreciative because I have no idea how to pronounce the name of your town. And we then see an advertisement for Spawntastic apparel where you can order for $50 a Spawn satin jacket. For those of you who were alive in the early and mid-90s, you may remember that this might have been the biggest boom for satin jackets in all of American history. Satin jackets, for whatever reason, were the rage at the time, especially sports team satin jackets. If you liked any major sports team or any major college team, it was almost guaranteed that you could find a satin jacket of that team. And, it seems pretty obvious that Todd McFarlane, being such a huge sports fanatic himself, would jump onto that craze and make a Spawn satin jacket. Personally, I always hated these kinds of jackets. They were sized really weird, and I didn't like how it was elastic at the waist and around the neck and also at the base of the wrist. And as someone who's rather tall and thin, getting these jackets to fit was a real pain. You basically had to order or buy these jackets and at least one size bigger than what you really needed to make sure that the length was correct. But then they were just super bulky and, they were too warm to wear in like 60-degree weather, but not warm enough to wear in 40-degree weather. So there was really only like a few points in the year where you could comfortably wear these things. Maybe you love them, but personally, these jackets were not for me. And if you are interested, you can find people selling this jacket online. However, get ready to pay for it because they go for anywhere from between $200 and $300 from what I saw when I was doing research for this video. No surprise, we also get an ad for Wizard Magazine, issue number 33 in this case, which is nothing special except for the fact that they do advertise a contest where you could win a Judge Dredd pinball machine. I didn't even know that a Judge Dredd pinball machine existed. I've never seen this pinball machine ever in my life. It was made by Bally Midway. I really want to play it now. I don't know where I'll ever run into this pinball machine, but I certainly hope I do because I would love to dump a handful of quarters into it. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement basically just talking about the spring Texas comic book shows that the guys from Image are going to be attending in the Spring of 1994, sadly, you just missed it. But it would have been cool to go to any of these, and if you happen to go to any of these and have any stories, feel free to talk about it in the comments section below. And that was Spawn number 18. Overall, I think that Grant Morrison did a really good job of telling a pretty well thought out and executed 3-issue story arc. We also got the introduction of a new character in the anti-Spawn, well, and I guess technically the angels at the space station too, and the mysterious stranger that Spawn met in the alleyway that he got a blank business card from. This book, for being a sort of a self-contained story that almost functioned as a mini-series within the mainline series, it did a really good job of, building upon the Spawn narrative that we already had, while also being kind of a jumping off point for the new direction that the story was potentially going to be going in, and also creating a little bit of mystery for us, the reader, with, not knowing what's going to happen with Jason Wynn and the anti-Spawn having no clue at all who the guy that, met up with Spawn in the alleyway was. And, it's a tough thing to do, to create that much story and intrigue with only 3 issues, and I think that Grant did a great job of it. As I stated before, Greg Capullo was originally only supposed to be signed on for these 3 issues, and I thought he did very well on them. And apparently Todd thought he did very well on them too, as he kept Greg on as the primary penciler all the way up until issue 100. Once again, to me, Greg essentially redefines the visual look of Spawn, and it's kind of impressive that, Todd thought so much of him as to allow him to start to slowly redesign the look of the character in such a dramatic way, especially since, Spawn's barely 2 years old by the time that change starts to take place. I mean, in these 3 issues, we see that his costume is still identical to the way that Todd created it, but those days of that costume are numbered at this point. And it's, pretty shocking that Todd would be not only willing to take the chance, but also to give that creative ability to another person with, the character that he essentially left Marvel to create. But these are just my opinions. Your opinions may differ. You might have thought Grant Morrison did a bad job with this, and you may not like Greg Capullo's artwork, but that's okay, because everybody's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.